going to have a little prelude here of a video with a song about migration.
This song is called Fronteras. Hay un camino que nos trajo hasta aquí. No conoce las fronteras, esta pasión dentro de mí. Es anhelo el que me empuja cada nuevo amanecer. Con mis temores, ilusiones y los restos del ayer. La esperanza nos acompaña, con ella nada nos puede detener. Yo de tu mano, tú de la mía, no hay nada que temer. Y río y bailo, está en mis venas, y libre sueño. This is where I belong. This is where I belong. ¿Quién sabe lo que el mañana nos quisiera regalar? Hoy es todo lo que tengo y lo voy a atesorar. Poniendo de manifiesto cuánta luz puedo irradiar y ser feliz, que es el remedio. Que todo lo puede mejorar. Y río y bailo, está en mis venas, y libre sueño. This is where I belong. Y río y bailo, está en mis venas, y libre sueño. And this is where I belong. This is where I belong. Yo pertenezco aquí. Thanks so much.
Welcome, everyone. Bienvenidas, bienvenidos. It's so good to see all of you. Welcome to today's virtual journey focused on migration in our current context. My name is Betsy Moe, and I am a mission co-worker in the Presbyterian Church USA, working with SEDEPCA to facilitate intercultural encounters like this one. Thank you so much for coming. First, I would like to introduce you to SEDEPCA's General Coordinator, Judith Castañeda.
Greetings to all of you. And on behalf of the entire staff of SEDEPCA here in Guatemala City, welcome. We are so glad that you have joined with us to learn more about the topic of migration, which is an ongoing concern by the people of Central America and our neighbors to the north. Today, you will have the opportunity to hear from an outstanding researcher and professor here in Guatemala, Lisbeth Gramajo Bauer, about the unfolding situation of migrants, as well as from Mark Adams, another Presbyterian mission co-worker, ministering at the border with Mexico and the United States. We at CEDEPCA believe that the path to justice is through education and encounter. So thank you for joining us in this path today.
Thank you, Hudit. We are thrilled to have so many participants today, and they are still coming in to this space. If this is your first virtual journey, a special welcome to you. We have been building this virtual space for just over a year now, and it is a joy to learn and grow together. We live in this global society now where my actions affect my neighbors. And so even as we are isolated because of the pandemic, it is so important that we nurture connections like this. In every virtual journey, we want to give you the feel of traveling as a group, because we know that that is a feeling that people long for right now. They wish they could be going to Guatemala with their church group or with a university group. And so we want to give that experience at Virtual Journeys. So if you were to travel to Guatemala, you would be moving outside your comfort zone every day to meet people and learn things for the purpose of transformation. In that spirit, you are going to be directed in a moment to a breakout room of 1 or 2 other people. Imagine yourself getting on a bus right now with a group in Guatemala, and we're headed to our first stop to learn about migration. So this bus ride is the perfect time to get to know another person in the group. So on this, with your seat partner in your breakout room, you're going to talk about just 2 things. First, you're going to introduce yourself, say where you're from, so very basic. And then second, we would like you to say 1 word to describe your mindset today as we approach together this topic of migration. Your word might be curious, concerned, frustrated, hopeful. Use your own word or use one of these that I just listed. Any word will work. Just try to name how you're feeling and what you're thinking as you come to this space. So if there's any doubt, I mean, sometimes the groups, there's a person that just starts talking and that's fine. But if you have any doubt about who should start, try alphabetical by first names. So you're going to have 6 minutes with your new bus seatmate. And so use those 6 minutes wisely and keep the conversation moving and keep your answers brief. I'll see you back here in 6 minutes. Welcome back from your breakout rooms. I see there are 74 of us here in the space so far.
I had 20 more seconds. I got cut off.
I know. I was right in the middle of saying something really important.
It was profound. Profundo, bien profundo.
That happened in our group too.
Oh yeah, that's bound to happen. So we just have to stay on the bus. I think that's the moral of the story here. Just everybody stay on the bus. There will be lots more time to think and process and even speak at the end of our journey together. Mm-hmm. So I hope that you've gotten to know another person, maybe that you haven't met before, who shares your sense of openness and to learning something new, because that's what we're here to do together. So often we hear about migration from the US perspective, but today we have the privilege of hearing about migration from the Guatemalan point of view. And not only that, but from someone whose life work in the academy centers around this specific topic. Lisbeth Gramajo Bauer is a friend of CEDEPCA and a regular presenter for us at CEDEPCA on the topic of migration. She is with us live today. Maybe somebody was in a group with Lisbeth, but she has prepared a presentation in a video format, which we will watch first, and then she's going to be available after the video is shown to answer questions. So feel free as you watch the video and as you think of questions to write them in the chat as they come to your mind, or if your style is to more take notes on your own and then ask them at the end, just in case she covers what you're going to ask, you can do that too. But we do want this to be a kind of a space where you're thinking and processing and able to ask questions. So without further ado, I present to you Lisbeth Gramau Bauer.
Hello, my name is Lisbeth Gramajo. I am a Guatemalan political scientist and anthropologist. Currently, I am working as a researcher in migration topics at the Universidad Rafael Landívar in Guatemala City. I am going to share with you a presentation about migration in Guatemala considering the current context of the pandemic. First of all, Guatemala has a long history of migrations. If you attend last year's virtual journey on migration, this first part will be a fast review. Historically, migration has been one of the main survival strategies of the Guatemalan population to increase family incomes. Internal and transborder migration have been two main strategies used by the indigenous Mayan population. In the short term, they moved to farming plantations in southern Guatemala or to Mexico to obtain resources. International migration to the United States is more recent. It started in the decade of 1970, prompted by the internal conflict, political instability, natural disasters, and high levels of poverty and unemployment. The main destination of this migration were the United States, Mexico, and Canada. After 5 decades of international migration, migration to the United States is in an advanced stage. Among the characteristics of this advanced stage, we find 1. A high level of irregularity. Most people migrate using the services of a guide or a coyote. In order to pay them, they request loans, and that is one of the main objectives in getting to the United States, so they can pay back these debts. 2. There are extended and mature social networks in the United States. 3. Mainly, it is a male migration, but gradually has evolved into a family migration. 4. Mainly, it is a migration for job opportunities. For example, gardening, working at hotels or restaurants, jobs that do not require a high level of studies. 5. The main link that connects migrants with their families are remittances, which are an important income for families. Many studies have shown that without this income, there would be more homes in poverty in Guatemala. Now, I will talk about the impact that the pandemic due to coronavirus has had in Guatemala migration. The first measure at a global level was the closure of borders with the purpose of preventing higher coronavirus contagion. This issue impacted migrants. Migrants in transit stranded along the borders. Asylum seekers applicants rejected at the borders, and migrants in detention centers at risk of becoming infected. Many Guatemalan migrants who already live in the United States faced the disease in their homes without professional medical care due to their irregular status and because they were afraid of being deported. Deportations from Mexico and the United States did not stop during the pandemic. During the first returns, prevention measurements weren't enough, which caused COVID-19 contagion between the deported populations. Deported population returned to their homes without going through quarantine, which also contribute to contagion to relatives and neighbors. We saw an increase of stigma and discrimination towards the deported population and to other migrant people that were entering the country. Some people who intend to migrate decide to postpone their trip due to restricted mobility during the first months of the pandemic. Through all of this, we see that the main impact of the pandemic was that migration became a topic of national security and an issue of public health. A clear example was seen in the way that the government of Guatemala dissolved the Honduran caravan on migrants in January 2021 using physical force, as we can see in this picture. Another example is in the way that the United States is immediately deporting migrant people arriving at their border by using Title 42, which does not allow people to enter for public health and safety reasons. In this slide, we see arrests at the southern border of the United States. You can see in the orange line the high level of arrests before the pandemic. In the red line, we see the clear decrease of arrests at the border due to the pandemic. However, if you look at the blue line, you can see how during 2021, arrests at the border have increased, even in higher levels than before the pandemic. Arrests at the border are an indicator of an increase in the migration flow. In Guatemala, this is due to several reasons. One, the mobility restrictions imposed at the beginning of the pandemic have decreased, and many Guatemalans who had postponed their trip are now resuming it. Two, the recent arrival of the Biden-Harris administration raises expectation in the population that there may be an immigration reform. In addition, coyotes are telling people that entering the United States will be easier than during the Trump administration. Three, we see a deterioration in the Guatemalan economic situation as a result of the pandemic and the two hurricanes that came at the end of 2020. In this slide, we see the arrest of unaccompanied minors coming from the three countries of the northern area of Central America. We can see three peaks. The first peak in 2014, when Obama's administration announced the humanitarian crisis of minors. The second peak in 2019, where Trump's administration started to practice the separation of families at the border as part of a zero-tolerance plan that want to dissuade Central American families to migrate. Lastly, we can see in 2021, there is another peak in the number of arrests of minors at the border, now under the Biden administration. Notice that the higher number of arrests are in blue. Those are from Guatemalan unaccompanied minors. This explains why the Biden-Harris administration has interest in attending the migration issue in Guatemala. In the first months of the Biden-Harris administration, we have seen an interest in approaching the migration issue in the region, including the recent visit of the Vice President Harris to Guatemala and Mexico. We see how the United States has an interest in understanding migration from the three countries in Central America. During the Conference of the Americas in May 2021, Kamala Harris explained correctly the facts that have an impact in Central American migration. She said, and so we are focused on addressing both the acute factors and the root causes of migration. First, the acute factors, the catastrophes that are causing people to live right now, the hurricanes, the pandemic, the drought, and extreme food insecurity. And then there are the long-standing issues, the root causes, and I am thinking of corruption, violence, and poverty, the lack of economic opportunity, the lack of climate adaptation and climate resilience, the lack of good governance. We can say that from Guatemala, the measures that are being taken by the Biden-Harris administration fills us with optimism, but we know that this issue must also be viewed with realism. We see with optimism the intention to rebuild the asylum system and the fact that the United States ended the Safe Third Country agreements. We see with optimism that the government of the United States is talking about the root causes of migration, at the emphasis placed on fighting the corruption that we know is an acute factor in Central America. However, being realistic, we know that the migration topic is and will continue being a topic of national security in the United States. The United States continues making their best efforts to externalize their border. We see how most of the deportations of Central American people occur from the Mexican territory. We see how Guatemala also contribute to stop the migration flow of other Central Americans that are trying to get to the United States. The US government has been emphatic in saying, do not come, the border is closed, and has continued doing quick deportations, including complete families using Title 42. We are concerned that a strategy has been announced so that asylum applications can be processed from Guatemala, as this may become a new Safe Third Country agreement. And we know that Guatemala is far from being a safe country for Guatemalan and Central Americans. Lastly, we know that the current Central American context is not the most favorable. The three Central American governments suffer corruption charges, connection with drug trafficking, and accusations of authoritarianism. The real dilemma is that as the United States seeks to address the causes that allow Central American migration and give hope, the Central American population seems to find no hope in their countries of origin, and they are looking forward to go to the United States. In this slide on the right, we have Kamala Harris' words. We want to help people find hope at home. But in the other side, we have the words from Honduran migrants that travel in a caravana wanting to arrive to the United States passing by Guatemala. We don't want to go back to Honduras. We are just passing by. This is the great dilemma. How we can give hope to a population that do not have opportunities and alternatives of a dignified life in their country of origin. Unfortunately, in Central America countries, we are witnessing a kind of vicious cycle. A person might leave his or her country due to serious reasons or root causes, and during the transit through Mexican territory, suffers many abuses. And then we see the return through a deportation process. However, the cycle does not end. We can see how it becomes a vicious cycle because the person that was deported has a debt to pay. And so that debt is the reason why they had to try again to migrate. It is a vicious cycle from which it is very difficult to get out. We have also seen some success cases of people that migrate to the United States, and these cases are the ones that encourage new migrations. We now can see how this migration topic in Guatemala is not easy because we have to approach in an integral way. Here, I am sharing with you my contact and information, and I look forward to hear your questions or comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you to Elizabeth for preparing that presentation. It's so thorough and it gave us a lot to think about. So if you do have questions at this point, go ahead and put them in the chat. And I'm going to just kind of look through one comment that could be a question, and I might pose this as a question to get things going. The US government is not admitting its role as a root cause. I'm wondering, Lisbeth, if you have heard anyone from the United States, Kamala Harris, admit any wrongdoing from the US perspective in creating some of the factors or the atmosphere that causes people to migrate. And Esvin is going to be doing, Esvin Serene from CEDEPCA will be doing some translation for us.
Sí, con mucho gusto. Sí, Lisbeth, ahí agregaron un comentario en el chat, pero por ahí también agregando a la pregunta, Betsy dice si se ha escuchado de algún funcionario del gobierno, de la administración de Biden y Harris, si ha mencionado alguno de los factores o de la atmósfera en relación a lo que es migración o a las causas de raíz que causan la migración en Guatemala.
Sí, hasta este momento no hemos escuchado, digamos, de la administración Biden-Harris, que ellos, digamos, reconozcan que Estados Unidos ha tenido parte en estas causas raíz de la migración. Pero lo que sí nos aparece apropiado es que sí ellos asumen, digamos, y tienen una lectura integral de todas las posibles causas de la migración en Guatemala. Tratar de tener un entendimiento integral, aunque no del todo se reconoce el papel que puede haber jugado Estados Unidos en el desarrollo de esas causas.
Yes, we understand that the Biden-Harris administration, they have not admitted or make it visible the root causes of migration. However, we understand that and we are seeing that they do assume the holistic or this whole view.
Thinking you look pretty good.
Or this whole view of the migration issue in the country.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that response. Okay, let's see here. Cheryl, as you are reading, Cheryl Rowan is helping to administer the chat.
I think this may not be we're going to try and make sure we don't miss any, but this is really relevant. I think, what is the current status of people being able to apply for asylum while they're still in their country of origin or their home country?
¿Cuál es en este momento, cuál es el estatus o cuál es la espera en las personas que están en su país de origen y están solicitando asilo?
En la actualidad no existe, digamos, un programa para que las personas puedan solicitar asilo desde Guatemala. Es por eso que los guatemaltecos viajan hacia México o a Estados Unidos y al pisar el territorio mexicano o estadounidense, ahí tienen que solicitar el asilo. De momento no existe un programa que procese las solicitudes desde acá.
So at the moment, there's not a program or there's not, they don't have the opportunity being in the country and seeking asylum. That's the reason why they migrate to the US or Mexico once they are in the Mexico or US territory, and that's when they try to seek for asylum.
Thank you. Then the next question from William White, it says, when Vice President Harris visited Guatemala, the U.S. promised to provide funds to address the root causes that you mentioned. Is there a reason to believe that these funds will be used in the manner intended?
Cuando la vicepresidenta Harris visitó a Guatemala, se hizo promesas de poder dar fondos o ayuda para poder para poder trabajar o enfocarse en las causas de raíz de la migración, pero no se tiene muy claro cómo se va a hacer el uso transparente de esos fondos.
Sí, hemos visto este anuncio de que se van a invertir nuevos fondos para tratar de contrarrestar estas causas raíz de la migración. Algo que han dicho también es que son fondos que no van a ir directamente al gobierno de Guatemala, sino que se manejan a través de las agencias que tiene el gobierno de Estados Unidos en Guatemala y a través de diferentes actores. Entonces, sabemos que entre los actores están ONGs, asociaciones, grupos empresariales, ¿verdad? Diferentes grupos, no necesariamente el gobierno de Guatemala quien va a manejar esos fondos. Eso, por un lado, nos parece una buena idea, pero seguro habrá que ir siguiendo cómo se utilizan e invierten esos fondos.
Yes, that was one of the promises that the Biden-Harris administration promised, delivering those funds. But those funds were not and they were going to be used for investment and also to tackle the root causes of migration. The proposal was that these funds were going to be given to association, private sectors, NGOs, and U.S. agencies and also other actors that they were going to be making use of that money. So that money was not going to be sent directly to the government. So that's a good, in a way, a good way of helping, but we still have to wait on that.
Thank you for that response. So let's see. I did see a question about coyotes and how they are, the coyotes present other problems of unpaid debts. Can anything be done in the system to deal with unpaid debts to coyotes?
En el tema de los coyotes, pues representa un problema, también una problemática, ya que pues esto representa deudas y al no pagar las deudas, pues esto causa también en las personas que la adquirieron. ¿Cómo podríamos manejar, resolver esto desde el sistema?
Sí, el problema es que, como bien han dicho, es un sistema, ¿verdad? La deuda no se hace con el coyote, ¿verdad? Al coyote se le paga para que lo lleve a Estados Unidos, pero ese dinero lo tiene que conseguir la familia con otras personas. Muchas veces son prestamistas de la propia comunidad que prestan el dinero a intereses muy altos, generalmente del 10% mensual. Entonces, la deuda se hace con estos prestamistas locales y el coyote es el que hace el esfuerzo por llevar a la persona a los Estados Unidos. Entonces, vemos que son muchos actores involucrados en el tema de llevar a las personas a Estados Unidos. Entonces, hay algunas iniciativas, digamos, para perseguir a los coyotes, pero esto no resuelve el problema de las deudas, vamos a decir, ¿verdad? Es un tema complicado que involucra a muchos actores y que también muchas veces estos coyotes no son vistos bien en la comunidad porque son esos guías que permiten a las personas llegar a los Estados Unidos, mientras que las deudas las hacen con otros actores locales.
So, as you were saying, this is a problem, and this is a problem, and it's not with the system, but it's directly with many actors that they lend the money. Someone that wants to travel to the US, this person will lend the money with either family members or even in the community. There are some there are some persons that lend money to the person that will be traveling to the state. And in many cases, they charge 10% of interest monthly to the person that it's acquiring this debt. So of course, this person it's forced. This person needs to pay that debt to these actors or these. In fact, in the community, there's people that they already are lending money to anyone that wants to travel to the States. And coyotes are seeing really well in the community because they at some point represent an opportunity for a person that wants to migrate.
Thank you for that response too. There is a question about SEDEPCA. Is it involved? Someone who's new to SEDEPCA tonight, wondering if SEDEPCA is involved with advocacy for US policy change. And to my knowledge, SEDEPCA is not, but a lot of people who do learn about migration and other issues through SEDEPCA go on to advocate in the United States for policy change. So is that correct? Am I being faithful to that? Perhaps Judith, that SEDEPCA is not actively involved in advocating for US policy change.
Yes, it's correct, your answer, but we really encourage friends in churches and organizations in the US to do so. And we're here ready to support and give information and data for that advocacy.
Thank you. Okay, we are going to need to jump to our next portion of the evening. And I just want to say thank you again to Lisbeth for your presentation, for answering questions, and just for giving your life to this kind of work, and on behalf of people who are really struggling to make the best life for themselves. So thank you, Lisbeth.
Okay, thank you for the invitation.
And now I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Mark Adams. Mark is a mission coworker of the Presbyterian Church USA, a colleague of mine in that way, but Mark works in a different area of Latin America. Mark works at the border of the United States and Mexico in Arizona, and will be telling you a little bit more about the ministry he's involved in there, as well as leading us in some biblical theological reflection about this topic. Mark, to you.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a real delight for me to be able to be here and be a part of this virtual journey with SEDEPCA. I've admired SEDEPCA for over 20 years since I've learned about the wonderful work that they do and been able to visit a couple times. And it's a real honor to be here in this virtual room with you in this journey. As Betsy said, I serve with Frontera de Cristo here in Douglas, Agua Prieta, Douglas, Arizona, Agua Prieta, Sonora. And when I arrived back in 1998, I'd migrated 2,000 miles from Clover, South Carolina to live in Agua Prieta, Sonora. This particular area was the primary crossing point for persons entering the U.S. without documentation. At that time, it was primarily folks from Mexico and who were migrating for economic reasons. And over the years, the dynamics and the migration paths have shifted, as well as the reasons and the places where people have come have changed as well. Was grateful to be asked to do a little bit of a biblical reflection this evening, but it's kind of hard when you think about trying to do a biblical reflection on migration, because where do you start? I remember early on when we were doing workshops called Immigration and the Church's Responses, one of my seminary professor said, "Oh, I've got a great book about that." And I said, "Oh yeah, tell me about it." And he said, "It's the Bible." And if we think about scripture, our faith story from the very beginning, from Genesis all the way through Revelation, it's about people on the move for different reasons. Sometimes forced migration, sometimes migrations for drought reasons or for religious reasons, but just the breadth of that. So it's kind of hard. So I chose a passage that probably no one thinks about when you think about migration. But it's a passage that has really spoken to me here on the border. And it comes from Mark chapter 1, and it's the first 15 verses, so the prologue of the Gospel of Mark. And as I read it, I'd like you just to think, what seems strange to you about this passage? And then we'll think a little bit about it together. Mark 1, chapter verses 1 through 15. The beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. As it is written in Isaiah the prophet, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way. A voice of one calling in the wilderness, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight paths for him. And so John the Baptist appeared in the wilderness, preaching a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. The whole Judean countryside and all the people of Jerusalem went out to him. Confessing their sins, they were baptized by him in the Jordan River. John wore clothing made of camel's hair with a leather belt around his waist, and he ate locusts and wild honey. And this was his message. After me comes the one more powerful than I, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to stoop down and untie. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. At that time, Jesus came from Nazareth in Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Just as Jesus was coming up out of the water, he saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." At once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness, and he was in the wilderness 40 days, being tempted by Satan. He was with the wild animals, and angels attended him. After John was put in prison, Jesus went into Galilee proclaiming the good news of God. The time has come, he said. The kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. This is the word of God. Lots of strange things in that passage. And the thing that has really stuck to me that I think after being here on the border is the piece from verse 14, where it says, after John was put in prison, Jesus went into Galilee proclaiming the good news of God. I never really paid much attention to that until being here on the border, but it was precisely when John was facing bad news that Jesus started proclaiming good news. And imagine that Jesus' followers and his friends could have said, this isn't a good time to do that. People might turn on you, you might get in trouble. And yet it was precisely when John was put in prison facing the death penalty that Jesus began proclaiming the good news and living out the good news. For me, as we experience a lot of bad news here on the border, whether that be people showing up battered and bruised and breaking down into tears and just holding on to you and saying, if you could just return our cousin's body, we would be happy. Or if people's who've just recently been deported after a life of living in the United States. Just as today, I was in the Migrant Resource Center in Agua Prieta, Sonora, and Dilmar and Claudia were there. They had lived for over 10 years in Trenton, New Jersey, and had been deported. They're from Guatemala City. And had come back after being deported back to Guatemala and made the treacherous journey through Mexico, have been extorted, in addition to the debt, going into the debt of paying the coyote, and then tried multiple times to come into the U.S. only to be returned over and over again to Mexico. Or I think of Emmanuel, a little boy, and his father. A couple years ago, when families started coming to petition for asylum here on the border, in larger numbers. They weren't coming from Central America to Agua Prieta because organized crime had said, we don't want anybody that's not from Mexico to come here. And so nobody was coming to Agua Prieta, but lots were going to our neighbors in Nogales, and they were needing some help. And so we worked it out so we could bring shuttles with the Frontera de Cristo van from Nogales to Agua Prieta. And one day I was the shuttle driver because we always wanted to have a U.S. person driving the U.S. plated van to provide some kind of protection. And we would go over the mountain passes. And one day I was gone, and our partners in Nogales knew that 13 was the number we could take. And I got word that no, there was 16. Could we take 3 extra? And I knew our policy, and I said, nope, 13. And they said, well, we'll send them on the bus later. And so Emmanuel, a little boy, and his father and another man got sent on a bus later that day. And later I got called by our partner at the Acame, the shelter where they were going. And the 13 had arrived safely there, which I didn't know that the mother who was pregnant was on the shuttle with us. And so they were coming to be reunited. And I got a call from our partner that said that the Mexican Migrant Protection Agency of the federal government was taking them to the Acame from the bus station and was stopped by organized crime and told, you may not take them. They go back into the bus station. They have to go back to Nogales. And for the safety of you and the safety of your family, they have to go back in. And so I just realized that I had put this family at danger. And so I thought, well, as a U.S. citizen, I will go and I'll take them from the bus station. Well, long story short, that didn't work out either. And Emmanuel, a little boy, ends up in this situation of being separated from his mother with organized crime threatening his family there. And so in the midst of all this bad news that we can encounter here on the border, sometimes it becomes easy for us just to talk about how bad things are. And I remember early on when I was here, we were sharing with a men's breakfast up in Loveland, Colorado, and we shared the story of a man who had migrated from coffee fields and his story of going into the United States and being returned to battered and bruised. And someone raised their hand and they said, you know, it's well and good to talk about how bad things are, but you need to do something about it. And this man had shared a vision for a different possibility for his community. His name was Eduardo Perez Verdugo. And so I want to share a video of that vision that has become reality now in one small way in which a community has sought to address root causes of immigration, bringing people together across borders.
Borders mean lots of things. People will talk about borders as places of exclusion or of hatred, even in death. But borders don't have to be places of division. God calls us to live into the reality that borders are also places of encounter, opportunity, and hope. Not just here on the U.S.-Mexico border, but wherever we lived and whatever borders that exist that divide us from other places. The ministry of Frontera de Cristo is centered in the community of Douglas and Agua Prieta. They grew up together. They're both about 120 years old. Frontera de Cristo seeks to work in partnership with people and organizations on both sides of the border and listen to what are the visions of the community and how can we support making those gospel visions realities.
When we started doing partnership, it was like not Frontera de Cristo doing things, but supporting organizations that need it. We were just thinking, how can we support directly to the migrants? People that are waiting to ask for asylum to the States, that are living in a tent in the line on the border, and they're very vulnerable to the organized crime. Our volunteers go, pick them up, walk with them, because they need to be safe. So the Migrant Resource Center is a place where people that are seeking asylum can come and use the restrooms, take showers, and we provide clothing, shoes, water, coffee, some food. We also provide medicine. The goal of the Migrant Resource Center is supporting our migrant brothers and sisters, whatever their legal status is, to be welcome and to feel safety in Agua Prieta. And with the children, you can see the smiles of finally we find a place where we're gonna be safe.
Cuando llegué a esta ciudad de Agua Prieta, me conocí con el pastor Marcos Adams. Nos sentamos para pensar en algo que diera respuesta a esta situación migratoria. Y lo más rentable fue una cooperativa de campesinos que tuviéramos la oportunidad de darle el valor agregado a nuestro producto. Entonces, Café Justo inició hace casi 18 años.
We want gospel values to be represented in how we treat those who are migrating, those who are seeking refuge, those who are fleeing extreme poverty or extreme violence, and move beyond just the humanitarian piece. Sometimes it's easier just to pick people up off the side of the road. But if we keep finding people on the side of the road in the same place, sooner or later we have to figure out how do we fix the road. The farmers from Café Justo gave us one way of people being able to stay on their land and not even have to go over that dangerous road.
The idea behind Café Justo is to address one of the root causes of migration, which are economics. Many families were pushed to migrate because of the low prices on coffee. When instead of $1.50 for every pound of coffee, they start receiving between 20 to 30 cents instead. A lot of people didn't see any other choice but to migrate. So Café Justo is giving them the opportunity to control every aspect of the business. Farmers, they don't just receive a fair price, but they control the processing of the coffee, the exporting of the coffee, the marketing. And in the coffee business, that's where the money really is. So one of the positive impacts that we've been witnessing lately is migration in reverse. People that had left, they're returning back because what they have now that they didn't have before is options. And migrate if they want to, but don't migrate because they have no other choice.
Creemos y hemos comprobado que esto ha sido la mejor manera de convencer a muchas familias para que se queden en su comunidad.
Our relationship with Frontera de Cristo has been really great since the beginning. We just see each other like family. Even though they're doing their piece and we are doing our piece, at the end we're working together for peacemaking.
The church here has such an incredible role because the church extends beyond all borders.
We don't see each other as different towns or as strangers. We see us as a whole community that just happened to be divided by this wall.
Hay dos ciudades que se hermanan, Douglas y Agua Prieta, y eso es lo que se ha hecho. Douglas puede compartir esa experiencia de hermandad con los otros estados de Estados Unidos, y Agua Prieta puede compartir en todo México. Yo creo que sí lo podemos lograr.
As Christians, we are commanded to go out. We are not commanded to stay put and just pray. We need to go out and engage and see what we can do in our own communities.
Peacemaking, I think, is the responsibility for all those who follow Christ, the Prince of Peace. Here on the border and in different places where we enter more fully into suffering, we can experience joy more fully. And I think when we don't enter into the suffering of the world, the joy is muted. When we see the 18-foot steel barrier that separates our communities from one another. It's a reminder of the work that we have as people of faith to work for a world where Jesus has broken down the dividing walls of hostility, and we can cultivate community across borders.
So if there's a moment or two for any questions, I guess we will have that now.
Yeah, does anyone have a question for Mark? It's a great opportunity to have him right here, to hear how he sees things from the border. Yeah, where are the coffee plantations?
So this particular one, in Mexico, there are 12 states that produce coffee. This particular coffee that Café Justo, the cooperatives, are actually in the state of Chiapas and are actually on the slopes of the volcano Tacaná, whose cone is in Guatemala. And one of the interesting pieces is that a lot of the laborers for the coffee farms in that area come from Guatemala. And early on, the farmers said that if we're talking about this being a café justo, if it's going to be justo for us, it has to be justo for everyone that's involved. And so they're working and figuring out how to make the whole business a just one for everyone involved.
Mark, there's a question that of the renewal of the Return to Mexico program that just came out, I guess. How does that affect your ministry?
So right now, with Title 42, not many folks are being received petition for asylum. So most folks are being removed expeditiously, expedited removals. And it has impacted us pretty significantly because beginning in December, the U.S. was not expelling folks through the Douglas Agua Prieta port of entry. And then in December, they began doing that. And many of the folks who were crossing from about 4 hours away, many of them were from Guatemala and Honduras, and some from El Salvador, but mainly Guatemala and Honduras. People are being brought from 4 hours away and being sent through the port of entry to Agua Prieta. So since that's happened, there's been 16,000 men, women, and children who've come and received welcome at the Migrant Resource Center, which is very different than when you saw in the video. In the video, it was at a time where we were mainly working with folks who were seeking asylum. But since the asylum process has been shut down, that's not the case. We had accompanied families for over a year and a half who were waiting for that process. And through a consortium partnership with the government, we actually were able to get them beginning that process. But to date, we haven't seen any folks in the remains in Mexico coming through here. But even historically, they weren't sent here to Agua Prieta, they were sent to other border communities.
Mm-hmm. There are a couple other questions. And Mark, I'm wondering if you could answer those in the chat, because the rest of us, we're going to move to breakout rooms again. This is kind of like getting back on the bus after a day of encounters with presenters. This is what we do at SDEPCA. You'd get up back on the bus and head back to your hotel. And now on this bus, after you've heard the two presenters, you have new seat partners, and you'll get to process what you've seen and heard today. We've heard a lot about just the facts and the kind of the reality painted by Lisbeth Gramajo Bauer, and then some of the hope in the midst of a lot of bad things given to us by Mark today. So these are things that we want you to process in the new breakout rooms or with your new seat partners. So first, you'll answer what stood out to you in the presentations that you heard. What is memorable to you? And maybe what's a new thought that you're pondering? So you're going to go back in your, these prompts will be in the chat, and you'll go back into some breakout rooms with new people, and you have about 7 minutes. We're going to give you 7 minutes in these breakout rooms until until the 40-minute mark on the hour, wherever you are. So enjoy your time with your new seatmates. We are back. So if you are in the main room, we're now all listening into your fascinating conversation. Oh, I do hope that everybody had a good chance to process a little bit. Transformation is a very slow process, and it involves a lot of speaking and listening and thinking again, sharing with each other how God is moving and prompting. So thank you for bringing your full selves to this virtual journey today. Thank you also to our presenters, Lisbeth, Mark, and Miriam. Or Mark, his wife Miriam was going to be a part of it, but we are grateful to them, and as well as our behind the scenes people running things, Eric Moe, Nancy Carrera, Cheryl Rowan. This has been a really wonderful journey together. And finally, because many of you are friends of SEDEPCA, you have previous experience with SEDEPCA, you're wondering how SEDEPCA is doing. And so I'm going to ask Judith Castañeda, before we close, to share a little bit about how SEDEPCA is in the midst of the pandemic. So Judith.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, again, thank you for being here with us tonight. We are doing fine, and the staff has been really creative to adapt to the situation that we have today. For instance, we had what we're calling a hybrid workshop with 2 facilitators here in the SEDEPCA Center and 20 teenage boys in Cabón, which is close to 350 kilometers from here somehow. So we're adapting to the situation. We feel okay. We had 6 colleagues in the staff who had COVID-19. A couple of them, Pamela is here, and we are happy that she's back at work, and Kimberly last week. All of them are doing fine. And we're looking forward to this second semester of the year. And next September, we will have an emergency relief project together with Presbyterian Church from Canada. And we will serve 123 families with emergency relief. And looking forward for our next spiritual journey and have the opportunity to see all of you in that. Yeah, thank you.
So we have a couple of slides just to share with you, if you're a visual person, of what you can do to, in this time, to support SEDEPCA. And Eric, if you can share those right now. Okay. So one is just to pray for our staff, physical and mental health. The staff is working remotely. We need that support for both physical and mental health during this time. Pray for the context, the political unrest, the poverty, the unemployment, the crisis. We do pray that you continue to support us in our creative ventures like this virtual journey. And we do hope that more people are able to receive humanitarian aid this year and have the funds to do it through SEDEPCA. Share our news and our work in your social media. And if you are not already like friends with SEDEPCA, SEDEPCA USA on Facebook, please make yourself a friend. Eric, the next slide shows a couple of things. If you want to hold your phone up to the screen right now and take a picture, it will take you to our Instagram page. It'll take you straight to our Facebook page, and it'll take you to our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is where you will be able to find the recording of this virtual journey if you would like to pass it along to somebody you know. We have, and if you're not a techie person that will hold your phone up right now, you can just search YouTube for SEDEPCA and find our page that way. And we will be posting this virtual journey recording within a few days. So those are all ways that you can stay connected. And we do know that every virtual journey leads people to different actions. You may want to support refugees in your community right now. You may want to lead efforts for education in your church. You may want to send support to Frontera de Cristo or buy some Café Justo using the link that Mark put in the chat. But if you do find educational events like this one powerful and transformative, consider donating to SEDEPCA. And there is a link in the chat box right now for how to donate to SEDEPCA. You may direct your donation to Intercultural Encounters or to the general fund. That's always a great place because it can go to where it's needed most. And finally, we would like you to give a little feedback tonight. So we have a link to an evaluation form in the chat. We're going to try something new. where if you click in your chat box on this link that's the bit.ly, the HTTPS, then the bit.ly, click on that, and it is going to take you to a 2-question evaluation form right now. And you'll even still be able to hear my voice as you do this. If you click on this, you'll fill in your email address and then 2 questions. What did you learn in today's virtual journey, or what was something that you remember from today's virtual journey? And finally, what would improve your experience on a virtual journey? More time in breakout rooms, more time for questions, anything like that. We would love to have your immediate feedback today. So fill that out right now if you're able. And then we're going to close our time together. So just take about 20 more seconds to do that. Don't overthink it. Just put your first thoughts down. We so appreciate your feedback. And if this is if this is challenging to you technologically, that's okay. You can just leave it, or and we may be sending it to you as a link in an email. So thank you everybody. Okay, let's close in prayer, and then you're free to go after that. You're free to go anytime, but you're free to go after that, or you can stay and fellowship a bit with the other people who are in the room. So join me in prayer. God, we thank you for a time when we could learn something new tonight, when we could put our heads together with other people from around the United States and Canada and Central America, and think about how your people, how we are one with people in all these places. We are all migrating somewhere, and some of your people need special support. So we pray that you continue to teach us about migration, teach us about welcome and hospitality, teach us how to live out your calling wherever we are. And we give ourselves now to you in the name of the one who has called us all his children, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you for coming, and feel free to stick around in the fellowship room or to take off if you need to. We know that it's late on the East Coast. It's dinner time on the West Coast. But we're just so grateful you were here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.